Hi, I'm Martin Curtis, and this is Change from the Centre. No surprise that I'm going to talk about the Mandelson affair this week. What I'm not going to do is do the arguments to death. I think other people are doing that, and that's not what Change from the Centre is about. I want to talk about what it means and what it says about British politics, particularly. The first thing I want to talk about is populism, though, and I want to talk about the ejection from the House of Commons of Lee Anderson and Zara Sultana. So just as a reminder, Lee Anderson MP is a Reform MP. Zara Sultana is a member of your party, both of which I think are pretty populist parties coming from the left and the right of British politics. They were both ejected from the House of Commons yesterday because they accused Keir Starmer of lying and refused to withdraw the remark. Now, in my view, they did this not because they believed in what they said. I'm pretty sure that's not true. I'm pretty sure they did it because they knew they would generate some headlines. Yesterday was somewhere where, yes, the opposition and some of the grandees in the House were going to make the headlines, but also some of the Labour on Labour criticism that happened within there was going to get it as well. So they both did this because they knew that by accusing Keir Starmer of lying, they would get ejected from the House and they would get some publicity from it. Part of the reason I say that is because I saw an interview with Lee Anderson afterwards where he talked about and tried to justify why he accused Keir Starmer of lying. And in reality, he couldn't do it. He really, really struggled. And it just got to the end of the interview to a point where he just said, well, I just think he was lying. And there is also clear precedent from this. So if you go back to 2022, this is one example. Ian Blackford, the then leader of the SNP in Westminster, during the Partygate debate, accused Boris Johnson of misleading the House and was ejected from the House of Commons as a result of it. So they both knew what they were going to do. What they both also knew was that yesterday's debate was one that a number of people who don't normally observe politics were going to switch on to and watch, either because the debate would feature in the news, or because they know that this is a big thing and a big issue because we're talking about the future of a prime minister. And I'll talk more about that later on. So they had to do something different in order to capture the headlines. And they planned to do this. And I have to say, before the debate, I sent a WhatsApp message to somebody that said, I bet this is going to happen. So I wasn't wrong. I wasn't surprised. And it doesn't surprise me that a populist act was carried out by people that represent populist parties. And I think it sort of reinforces a point I've made, and that it's the crux of what the name Change from the Centre means. That unless the centre ground of British politics wakes up and starts to make fundamental change, then the change will happen from one of the political extremes, and it will be the sort of change that we don't want and don't need. So over the last few days, I've come to the conclusion that Keir Starmer is almost definitely toast. I don't think it'll happen immediately unless something dramatic happens between now and the local elections. But I do think the Labour Party is going to want to get the local elections out of the way. I also think that both sides of the party, before they commit to getting rid of Keir Starmer, will want a credible candidate. And I'm not sure that in terms of a candidate of the right of the Labour Party, the centre-left of British politics, I don't think Wes Streeting is necessarily the man. I may be proven wrong here, but I think he has some closeness to Peter Mandelson that will really, really expose him during a leadership debate. So the only alternative at the moment is Angela Rayner, and I don't think that the right of the Labour Party, the centre-left of British politics, think that she's a credible prime ministerial candidate. I struggle with the idea of Angela Rayner being seen on the international stage, which is the area where I actually think Keir Starmer has done a decent job, to be fair. Part of the reason for Keir Starmer going, though, yes, it's his judgment over Mandelson that will ultimately see him go, not about him lying necessarily, because I think that argument has been busted. So in Prime Minister's questions today, so I'm talking to you on Wednesday. Yesterday was the Select Committee interview with Ollie Robbins. The day before was the parliamentary debate about Keir Starmer and about the appointment of Peter Mandelson, with Keir Starmer standing up. And today at Prime Minister's questions, Kemi Badenoch made the point that she could not accuse the Prime Minister of deliberately misleading the House. The point for me about Keir Starmer is bad judgment around Mandelson, no two ways about it. But actually, it goes back to the point at which he was elected as Prime Minister. There is a reality, in my view, that people did not vote for Keir Starmer because they wanted Keir Starmer, in the same way that they voted for Blair in '97 because they wanted Blair as much as they wanted the New Labour project. And that lack of love for Keir Starmer meant as soon as he got tough, people fell out with love with him pretty quickly and fell out with the Labour Party. And the Labour Party now need to do something to fix it. And part of the point about candidates is which candidate is it that is going to do that, that's going to create some love for the electorate midterm. But there's an important lesson here. If Keir Starmer goes, and I think he will, and I think he probably deserves to be fair, he will become the 5th Prime Minister in 10 years. So our Prime Ministers are lasting, on average, less than 10 years, less than 2 years, sorry, at the moment. And you put that in contrast to the period before that. So we had, in a period of 37 years, we had Margaret Thatcher, John Major, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and David Cameron. That's 5 prime ministers in 37 years. 2016, when David Cameron went, we had Theresa May, we had Boris Johnson, we had Liz Truss, we had Rishi Sunak, and we've had Keir Starmer. So 5 prime ministers in 10 years. So prime ministers are lasting on average 2 years, where previously they were lasting more than 7 years each. That makes it really, really difficult, in my view, for politics to function. And we need to move to a point where there is an expectation that prime ministers are going to serve at least in the medium term, say, so for longer than one period of parliament. The reason for that is that you cannot get things done with that constant change of prime minister, because with a constant change in prime minister, you get a constant change in ministers, you get a constant change in direction. And we need less of that. We need more stability, and we need a political system that can think long term, because the huge infrastructure issues that our country faces in terms of rail infrastructure, road infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, the reorganisation we need to make to our political system, all those things, some of which Labour is trying to do at the moment, as an example, through local government reorganisation, all those things just become impossible to deliver. So let's have an example. Let's say we have a leadership debate in the Labour Party, and the incoming Prime Minister has made a pledge during that debate, because it's unpopular with Labour councillors, that they are going to cancel local government reorganisation. A necessary change won't happen. And a lot of work that has been expended in the last few years will be blown because of that. And then we move on to something else. And it's also true, by the way, local government does need reorganisation. This may not be quite the right reorganisation, but part of the reason why I think the government are rushing it through is because pretty much the same argument. If this is still going on during a general election campaign, it will become a very populist thing to do, to cancel it, because people are afraid of the change. But actually, in my view, local government reorganisation does need to happen. But the most important point is we need prime ministers in place who have some longevity so that they can think long term and deliver long term, at the very least medium term, because our country is desperately, desperately suffering at the moment from that lack of long term thinking. So before I wrap up this video by talking about how we move forward from here, I want to do my normal plea, really, which is, if you've liked what I've said here, if you think I'm providing some food for thought, please consider subscribing to the channel. Please consider liking this video, and also leave a comment. All of those things are really, really helpful to me. If you know anything about YouTube, then subscriptions are everything, and they'll all help me to grow the channel and move it forward. What I didn't want to do was leave this video at a point where I talked about the fact that our prime minister is going to go and what that actually means and what it actually says about the country. I want to talk about how do we stop this happening going forwards? Because there's a reality, which is these things, these abuses of power, like the appointment of Peter Mandelson, those things have sort of always happened. They become more and more visible over recent years, and they've become more and more acceptable as society has adapted and changed. But they have always happened. And in recent years, you can look at Boris Johnson as a great example of abuses of power that went on. I think the whole Partygate thing was potentially an abuse of power, but he tried to appoint people into places where they really oughtn't have gone. And he did other things like prorogue Parliament. So there's a reality that if the system stays the same, then we end up with the same things happening again and again and again. You'll get better and worse prime ministers, but you're always going to get a repeat. There are two things that I think might help going forward in relation to what's gone on with Peter Mandelson. The first one is a written constitution, where I think defining what misleading the House means, what deliberately misleading the House means, how you rectify that, how you investigate those things and the consequences, having them into a written constitution rather than something that's evolved over the years and actually isn't laid down anywhere in statute. I think that would help, but I think that's a minor part of it. I think the most important thing would be a move towards proportional representation, because I think the minor party within a PR system would act as a voice of conscience in this situation. Can you imagine the Liberal Democrats being a minor partner in a coalition government, being told that they wanted to appoint Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States? I would like to think that the Liberal Democrats, I'm no particular fan of the Lib Dems, but the Liberal Democrats in that situation would say that's not acceptable. And that sort of voice of conscience, I think, would really, really help provide balance to the all-encompassing power that parties new to government actually get because of the control they're able to exercise over their own MPs, bearing in mind those MPs are there and in the House, many of them, because of the swing towards that new government. So we can do one of two things. We can either sit still and listen to leaders of parties say we're not going to be sleazy when we come to government, it's all going to change, it's all going to be sweetness and light, and then wait for that to not happen, or for it to switch back again going on in the future. Or we can make fundamental changes that make those things less likely. And that's fundamentally what Change from the Centre is about making change to our system, to improve our system, so politics becomes something that is seen to serve people more than it serves itself. And I'm afraid that's not where politics is at the moment. Once again, thank you very, very much for your time. I really do appreciate the fact that you take time to watch these videos, and I really do enjoy doing them, to be honest. So thank you very much.